Welcome to the Pastors Lab Podcast, a new resource for helping church leaders think biblically and strategically about the local church. In each episode, we'll talk with thriving leaders on the front lines of ministry nationwide. I'm Ronnie Parrott, and I believe churches get better when their leaders are learning together. If you're new to the podcast, thanks for joining. Joining me today as my co-host is Dr. Michael Criner, who is the new pastor at First Baptist Church Rockwall in East Dallas. Leaving Rock Hill Baptist Church in Brownsboro, Texas. There's a lot of rocks, Michael. A lot of rocks that you are pastoring. So thankful for Michael to be on the podcast. Michael and I have been friends for a long time. And Michael, what's it like pastoring all these different kinds of churches with rock at the beginning of their name?
Hey, on this rock I will build my church. Let's go.
Ooh, wow. Hey, that's great. Hey, that's a great thing. Hey, Joining us as our guest today is a dear friend, Pastor Josh Powell, who is the senior pastor at Taylor's First Baptist Church in Taylor, South Carolina, a legacy church and a dear friend. He doesn't have much hair, but he is here with us. Sure. And a great pastor, great preacher. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to be here with the doctors.
That's right.
Criner,
You're still in the process for you.
Yeah.
Are you almost done?
Oh, yes. I've been almost done for 15 years now. Right?
That's great. That's awesome. So Josh and I have known each other for a long time. Michael Criner and I have known each other for a long time. All three of us talk almost every day, I think. Like, we talk every day over text, over video. It's like a regular, ongoing joke stream with us three. And I'm really honored to have both of you guys on the podcast today.
It's great. Thanks, Ronnie, for having us.
It's an honor and a privilege. Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Parrott.
So can we just address like where Michael Criner's sitting at? I don't know if you could see. I feel like he's in like one of those hallways in Star Wars with lights on the ceiling.
Death Star. He's on the Death Star.
Yeah, what happens, Ronnie, just recently started here, and the office that I'm moving into is just not quite ready. Won't be ready even till kind of mid-June. So I'm in a storage room that has the biggest TV I've ever seen in my life.
Only the best for the new senior pastor.
Only the best.
Hey, well, congrats to you, Michael. I know, like, you just literally. I was joking earlier, but literally, you just started pastoring this past Sunday in terms of actually preaching. And you were called out just over a month ago to serve this church, and moving your family across 2 or 2.5 hours or so. Man, how excited are you?
Yeah, genuinely excited. There's always this newness that comes when you come to a new church, and just meeting of people and their excitement, and then combined with your excitement. And so it's been good. And even for our kids, just answered a prayer for our kids to find new friends and get connected pretty quickly. So it has been really, really good. However, it really has been, at the time of this recording, my second day in the office. So I would say that everything's just kind of getting used to where everything else is at.
That's great. Well, so Michael is joining me as my co-host today. Every episode, I'll have a co-host who's helping me engage with a specific guest on a specific topic. And Josh Powell is our guest today because Josh, just over 3.5 years ago, took over as a senior pastor of what we call a legacy church. The Taylor's First Baptist Church was birthed in 1864, and Josh has been a pastor in South Carolina, I think nearly most of your ministry, Josh. But taking over a legacy church is a major thing. And there's a lot of pastors who are listening to this podcast who have taken over a legacy church, or are in process, or are even praying through that God would call them to the established church and to lead one. And so I thought it'd be great to have this conversation with you and see how you might encourage pastors along the way. So why don't you just take a minute or two, give us the sort of Josh Powell story, give us the overview of who you are.
Yeah. Well, again, I appreciate being on with you guys. I am a third-generation Baptist pastor's kid. So I guess kid. My grandfather was a Baptist minister. My father was a Baptist minister. All three of them in South Carolina. So third-generation South Carolina Baptist. Just to kind of put a little bit more onto that, my wife Allison, her father and grandfather were both South Carolina Baptist pastors, and so grew up in in the church, grew up with a clear understanding of the gospel, saved at an early age, and followed the Lord in my life. Got called into the ministry at 19. Kind of pursued this idea of playing basketball in college. And the Lord used all of that to just kind of show me how He is directing my path toward ministry. And so in 1994, which I affectionately term as the late 1900s, I went to North Greenville University, at the time North Greenville College, studied there in Christian Studies, went to Southern Seminary in 2000, did an MDiv, started a PhD work around that time, started pastoring at the same time. So started pastoring and PhD the same month. And I pastored a First Baptist Church of Fairdale in just outside of Louisville, Kentucky. That was my first church. I had worked on staff before since around 1998 was my first staff job. But pastored First Baptist Church of Fairdale till 2009. In 2009, felt the Lord pushing me, calling me to teach and train pastors overseas. So lived in India for a while, started a seminary there till 2014 when that work had kind of been established and I was able to set it up and leave it. And I came back to my hometown in Lexington, South Carolina, and pastored a church that was struggling, a church that had been pretty vibrant and had gone through some difficulty. In fact, it was a church that my home church had started. So my dad had started this church and my father-in-law had pastored. So it was really a family connection. So I had a heart for this place, but had really gone through some difficult time in major conflict and controversy where they had lost more than half of their regular attenders on a Sunday morning. So they called me back, asked me to come in, did that for 7 years. And it was from there that Taylor's first called me. This is my third pastorate then. And each one has had some particular challenge, has been some sense of a revitalization that I went into. And I did a different route a little bit, Ronnie. My first church was 37 people voted on me. And so I didn't come up through a larger church, learning the ropes, residency programs, anything like that. I dove straight into 37 people voting on me. My second church, 137 people voted on me, and then moving into Taylor's, which is a good bit larger, but had dropped to less than half of what they had run just a decade before. So all three of them were challenging situations. Taylor's would be the first one that I would consider a legacy church. However, all of them had their challenges and had to kind of work through those.
Yeah, I love this conversation because, Michael, arguably you're taking over a legacy church following a long-term senior pastor, and I know that alone can be somewhat intimidating. And I know we've had conversations with Josh before about some of the things he's learned, and I'd be interested to know if you have any direct questions for Josh currently going into the job that you're going into. What kind of questions would you have for Josh?
Yeah, I'm following a pastor who has been at this church at First Baptist for 35 years. He celebrated his 35th anniversary. A month later, I'm being voted in. The pastor before him, Pastor Jones, he had been here, I think, 30 years, 31 years. So over 66 years, there's been two pastors at this church. And so with that, there comes maybe some expectation, but also a culture, particularly among the staff. So a two-part question, really, Josh, is when you think about the staff that you inherited, it's probably changed some since you've been there, but also the church culture. You inherited a culture of a people. And how did you go about, what were some of the simple things you did to get to know staff, but then also to get to know the people of the church to help shift the culture from whatever it was to where it needed to go?
No, that's good. Every one of these situations of a church like Taylor's or like Rockwell, they all have their own unique stories. And so the very first thing I had to do was learn the story of this church. You have the immediate history, which matters probably the most in how you're going to lead and where you're going to push your people, where you're going to step back and let your people heal a little bit, where you're not going to, there's going to be landmines that the immediate guy before you has left for you to step in. And there's going to be places you can jump and leap off far down the road. And then you also have to understand the long history of the church. So Taylor's, for me, to connect with that culture, yeah, I had to come in and get to know the staff. I mean, it was my first, it's really your first chance or first thing to do. I think that's the biggest thing in a church our size is you gotta, I had one pastor tell me, cause Lake Murray, I'd gotten at Lake Murray, my previous church, and we had gotten before COVID really, cause I mean, COVID comes into the mix of my timeline, but before COVID, we were running 600 or so and getting to that change to where, one pastor said, when you run 700 people, you have to become comfortable being a manager that pastors rather than a pastor that manages. And so he's kind of like, that was where he drew the line at about 700. And I found that to be true. Like there's a sense in which you have to come in and learn how to manage a people. And it's a lot different pastoring a church like this when you got 70 people on staff that you're trying to figure out what their relationships are. Can we move forward with this person? My inclination is never to fire. My inclination is always to coach, to say, how can we move forward? So I don't want to come into it thinking I got to get rid of people. I want to come into it thinking I got to coach people. And then in the coaching process, you decide, all right, there's some people on here that we can make work and we can't. So yeah. I spent the first 6 months literally with lunch in my office. I would have my assistant order lunch in, and I met personally with every single person on staff as often as I possibly could, one-on-one, getting to know them, getting to know their heart, especially our ministry staff, and just seeing if it was a good fit. And not only that, trying to see like, who do I have? Because kind of the direction you're going to push in is going to be the personnel that you have. I mean, most churches like us, we're investing over 50% of our budget in people. And so that kind of determines your ministry. So my vision is going to have to match up with my personnel. So a lot of it was figuring that out. Culture-wise, I was looking for something that this church has traditionally long-term been a part of that I could latch on to. Taylor's First Baptist has been a huge CP giving church. They've been number one or number two in our state really for 30, 40 years. And so latching on to that sense of giving, but they've also not been the church that sins. And so they write the checks, but they don't kind of have that. So I look to say, let's latch on to the giving, and now let's jump into the sending and kind of shift into that. So there were some of those cultural things like that we had to figure out.
No, that's really helpful. In that same vein, so you have an established church with established people. A lot of times when a church loses their pastor, they are going to lose some people, but the folks who stick around are those who are like all in. So you take them over. How do you take the existing congregation that you have, but then also be able to, we would say, reach new people? And so if that's evangelism, but also attract new members who are maybe moving to the area. How did you take the old, but also focus on reaching and growing the new?
Well, first of all, you got to stabilize things. I mean, that was the thing here. So like Criner's spot, he's moving into a different kind of situation. I was moving into a kind of a crisis situation. They had gone through a rapid decline. And so you had to bring some stability to it. So step in, make the pulpit, lead from the pulpit, lead with the word, preach, the expository preaching, make that your number one thing. I think that attracts people. A stable ministry that has the scriptures leading out is attractive to people. More than anything else, I think that's what people are longing for. So you got to establish that first of all, and then you have to really just start being intentional about we've got to be welcoming to new people. And Greenville County in South Carolina is one of the fastest growing areas in the Southeast, especially. So for our people, creating that excitement to have new people come in. The other thing is, I still believe in the old mantra, new organisms grow faster than old ones. So I had to create a new space. And so I added, for example, I added a third service that was in a different venue, that we were able to say, hey, here's something different. And that we've seen that be the attraction for a lot of new people saying, hey, there's something new going on. We remodeled something quickly. I wanted to do that. And we added something. And so it kind of showed that this is a newer day. We're adding something in and we're creating a lane for these people. So it fit in with the mission and vision as well. But it was just kind of being clear on some of those things.
Well, I guess when you're the bishop of South Carolina and you come into pastor church, you can do all kinds of things.
You can. I had been, and I know you're joking. But, I had been. One of the things about this situation was Taylor's did not use. And here's a legacy thing for you. I think there's a lot of good churches in Greenville, and there's a good brotherhood of pastors. I didn't have that in our last place, but there's a lot of good guys. One of the things that convinced me is one guy in our area who his church is blowing up. I mean, he's growing like crazy. He's about 20 minutes south. And he said something that was vital to me. First of all, Taylor's didn't use a search firm. They didn't use a company. They did that before and it didn't work. So they were kind of against it, and so they said, hey, we're going to pray. We're going to find the guy. I probably would have never been chosen if that was the case, that they got my name. They came to visit me without me even knowing they were coming to see me at my previous church. And then they came to offer. But that guy, when I was in the process, this pastor friend said, hey man, all of our churches are better when Taylor's is healthy. And I think that is part of being a legacy church. When in your area, when people are out here who are unchurched or not a part of the church or just church adjacent, if you will, when those people see a church that's been established like Taylor's not doing well and suffering, they think, man, all the churches are not doing well and suffering. And this guy was saying, hey man, it's better for us for Taylor's to be thriving, because then it shows everybody in the area that these churches are strong in Greenville County. And he said, we've been fighting that since Taylor's has struggled. And so that was encouragement to me. And I think that's something that legacy churches have that other churches don't. The church plants and the other things, they pop up and they come up and they may meet in different places and different, but this church, I mean, we got 250,000 square feet on 43 acres in the middle of town. And if this church is not doing well and it starts going down and the buildings look ragged and everything else, then people are going to have a bad view of the church itself in the community. And that's part of the I think the burden of the legacy church, or at least the responsibility.
Yeah, and with that, Josh, I think about our context here in Rockwall. We're in 2 years or 2.5 years celebrating 175 years of being having a witness in this region. Significant. It's very, like, a church plant isn't able to say that. They'll celebrate 1 or 2 or 5, which is great, and I'm for more churches, just as you even shared. But in the process of that, the blessing of having a church that's been in a context for so long, been an influence in a community, can also build with it a resistance to any type of change, because they had maybe success at one point or even are successful now, but they also need to make some changes and shifts to be able to reach the next generation, but also to care for a previous. So how did you handle maybe resistance from existing members of going, well, man, I just remember we tried that before, or we did this in 2008, and you go, man, that's great, but that was a while back. So how did you handle some of that coming in with an established church, but also with a vision to continue that ministry for years to come?
Yeah, I think you got to change something early and change something regularly. So you have to build a culture of change. But with that, like you said, man, there's landmines. I mean, they had a service before that was more modern. They called it the modern service. And
very creative.
It ended, very creative. And it ended, and it was like ended, and it ended with disaster. You know what I'm saying? Like it was not well received. Things didn't go well. Wasn't rolled out well. It didn't work. And so when I was looking to start a service that was a little bit different, I just knew I couldn't name it the modern service. I got to come up with some other title, some other thing, which is fine. But there's ways you got to step around some of that stuff and get the same thing done in change. And then you just got to be ready to absorb it. Have a reason, have a vision, have a mission that you're trying to accomplish, and have everything flow to that and say, look, simply here at Taylor's First, I came up with something that's just genius. Change the world for Jesus. And so,
oh man, that is,
yeah,
you should have your
is,
PhD just for that.
seriously. I mean, I don't know how it came to me. It was a Holy Spirit revealed moment.
It's brilliant.
I just said, that's what we're going to do here. We're going to change the world for Jesus. And so I just refer everything back to that. Man, if we're going to change the world for Jesus, we got to be ready to change ourselves. And we got to be ready to, we can't go about as business as usual. And I just start throwing everything toward that. And part of the situation here in the history of this church, especially the recent history, is the people here were desperate for it. They were looking for something again, some direction, some guidance, relevance again, and that was easier. That's not every context though, and that's the issue with these churches.
Yeah. So how did you know? Oh, go ahead,
Michael. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. You're the co-host.
Y'all fight about it.
Yeah, let's fight over it. Well, how did you know what to change quickly? Because I think guys will come in and they've got all kinds of ideas of what to change immediately, but they maybe shouldn't do that. You know, painting a wall is great, but that may be the last thing you need to be doing right now. So what do you wish you would have done quicker, but what do you maybe regret changing so quickly?
Yeah, Michael, is that the first thing you thought of since you're sitting in this random room in your new church?
Yeah.
Is painting a wall?
There are change about this closet.
Yes. I'd like to get out of here, right? Yeah.
No, and that's, man, I'll tell you this story, and this probably won't even make the podcast. Y'all probably thinking, what in the world is he talking about right now? I remember
we're already recording. Everything said on the podcast is going on the podcast.
I remember watching this show one time of Tiger Woods and Nota Begay. You may not know that name. They were friends in college. Either way, they're talking about golf, right? And Tiger is sitting there and he has got everything down to a science, every part of his swing, everything else. And so he asks this guy, he goes, how do you hit that shot? He goes, I don't know. I just feel it, grip it and rip it. You know what I'm saying? Like Tiger, it blows Tiger's mind because Tiger's going, oh, I hit it like this. I move my hands forward. I mean, everything to a detail. The other guy goes, man, I'm all feel. Well, of course, Tiger wins 15, majors. The other guy won one. But the point I'm trying to make is sometimes there's things that you just got to grip it and rip it. You just got to feel it and know, hey, this is something that I can do. So that takes being in touch with the Holy Spirit and prayer. I mean, it takes a lot of saying, I need to do that. It takes being in touch with your people. You got to be around them and listen to them and hear what they say. And it takes a sense of, I'm about to set a precedent here and I've got to be careful. Like, Michael, your first Sunday, I'm assuming you wore a coat, no tie. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a strategic move. You know what I'm saying? Correct. Like, it may not be where you want to be, but you didn't come in there with your shirt untucked and your white tennis shoes on, which I know you love. You came in there with a coat because you didn't want to offend some, but you wanted to find them, but you didn't want to set the precedent. I'm going to wear a suit every week.
Right.
So there's some sense in which you've got to figure out, like, here's where my people are. Here's what they can stomach. Here's a change I can make, and feel it and just go with it. And
that's great.
And go ahead.
No, I thought you were going to go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just saying that's what we did. So I listened to our people. One, the building is running down. It looked horrible. There are certain places in this building that I would never want my, if this was my house, I wouldn't live this way. And so I walked out there with this one guy, a guy who was, he literally was a genius as far as, industrial outdoor architecture landscaping. He's this genius. He's done a lot of the downtown Greenville revitalizations and everything. And I walked out and I just looked at our front of our building, which was overgrown. There was trees running up. You couldn't even see the front of our building. And I said, would you want your house this way? And put my arm around him. He literally turned around and started weeping. And this guy was a hard, crusty guy. He turned around and started weeping. He said, man, I've been waiting 15 years for a pastor to care. Wow. And it was just saying, like, we need to clean this place up. We need to have a little bit of, respect about what we have and stewardship about what the Lord's given us. And so it was little stuff like that people were like, let's do it. That man donated the money, redid the whole landscaping, pressure washed the building. That was a small seeming thing, but for our people, it was like, hey, now somebody cares. They love it. And so that was just part of the process. I mean, but it's a triage. It's like, what is there that we can jump on? And what is it that'll do the most for the least? I mean, in the sense of spending your capital that you may have from the beginning. So there's a lot of it that's just, I hate to say it, but it's a lot of it is just grip it and rip it. Let's figure this thing out. Let's figure out our people. Let's figure out our place, and let's try to make it better.
That's great. And I'll ask both of you this, because a lot of what we're talking about is balancing tradition with innovation in new ministry. But I say innovation lightly. I think there are biblical principles around the church that are everlasting from New Testament through the date of Jesus' return. What are some of those guiding principles that maybe you guys are both thinking through intentionally of like, here are the things that we must do. We can honor the past and how we've done them. What's the line of scripture, the line of whatever that we're talking about to carry the ball forward in the church? Like, what are those tent pegs that you guys are most interested about in preserving as you move into kind of the future of your churches?
Go ahead, Josh.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Criner. I've been talking the most.
Well, I would just, for me, I go back to the mission of our church, and every church worth its salt is going to have the same mission. It's going to be centered around the Great Commission. So we want to help people who are far from God become followers of Jesus, and we want to help people actually follow Jesus. So there's this, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to observe. So I want to get things back to that every time. They've been doing that for a long time. However, there's some things that sometimes based on previous leadership might be resistant to doing, comfort level, maybe just unsure of how it would come off, or even exposure, doesn't want to be seen. So here's an example that we instituted my first Sunday, and that was just simply going live on Facebook and YouTube, on those platforms. That had not been done here, and there wasn't a theological disagreement on why should or shouldn't do that, but it's something I just knew, hey, this can help us have a front door to our community, whereas it hasn't been done in the past. And that's not to critique previous leadership. They just weren't interested in us doing that. They weren't interested in being on TV like that, or on Facebook or YouTube like that. And so we did it. The team pulled it off wonderfully. And so it was an opportunity for us to go, hey, we're going to continue to do the worship that we've been doing through song, but also the teaching through God's word like has been done. We're just now going to kind of go public and make that accessible to our people, but also as a front door for those in our community. The response we've received just in this, very brief time has been very positive. And I think even for Pastor Steve, who messaged me, man, it was so great to be able to watch the service very quickly on a Sunday morning. And so I think that was a way that we could balance, reaching our community, being innovative, but honoring the past. And it's the same with Wednesday nights. They have a pastor's Bible study, and I'll be teaching on Wednesday nights. We're going to be recording that to make it accessible for our people who want to stay engaged with what we're teaching on Wednesday nights, but they may not be able to come. So that's just a simple thing that we've done just very quickly. And even as Josh has mentioned, just those kind of things that we can immediately do to help propel the mission. So that's an example of what we've done.
That's great.
Yeah, same way. So for me, there's those, I think you said the tent pegs that you hold on to and you place in the ground, and then where you go. So I also am a firm believer, and I like it. So I know some guys who are different, but I love preaching and teaching. And so one of the things I felt like that I've always had to do is be in front of my people. So I've actually created more spots to preach and teach. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not running from those spots. I'm jumping in those spots and saying, hey, here I am. And so, for example, Criner mentioned it, Wednesday night, pastor's Bible study. We'll have several hundred there, and it's a time for me in front of them, and a lot of them are older ones. So I'm able to show love to them, at the same time move some things that previously they've been opposed to, because they know Josh loves them and cares about them. So it's just a way of saying, hey, I'm going to take advantage of times to show my people I love them, and that way I can change some things. For Criner, it was, adding something simple in the first week of putting something online. For me, this building, our building hadn't been touched in years. And so I took an old space and said, we're going to remodel this, and we're not going to pay a dime. We're going to pay for it, but we're not going to borrow anything. We're going to do a big project and not borrow. And I just kind of stepped out on a limb, and we remodeled a space that we use all the time that was, I'm talking dated. When I say dated, I'm talking like bad. Like when it was built, it was probably already 30 years behind. And so we remodeled that to a modern space that we use constantly, and we did it debt free. So it was a way to say to our people, hey, look at what God's done. You know what I'm saying? Look at how he's provided, and we're going to change things, and this is going to be the standard by which we go forward. So whenever we have the next building project, we did that little one. Whenever we have the next one, this is the standard. So you can see how nice this is. It's only going to get nicer. So that was those little things that we jumped on. We jumped on early to get it going. But
yeah, I would agree with both of you guys on those two things too. Just real quickly, what I hear you both saying is in all of this is the power to shepherd your people to some of those decisions. I mean, throughout hearing both of you guys talk, and you, Josh, the power of relationships and relational capital. Michael, I know you're building that. You're brand new, but still building that. But even using the existing leadership to help you execute what you thought was right for the church. No matter what size church that you might be at, if you're listening here today, you all have relational capital. And so whatever those decisions are that you're trying to move the ball forward on, you can't do it alone. You got to have relational capital to get it done. And so involve other leaders in the decisions, help them to see the need for it, and then execute it with the help of others. There's a little pause there. Sorry. Anything you guys want to add to that?
No, I think my granddad said he was in the ministry. Ministry is about people. It's not about systems and structures. I mean, your systems and structures can be all screwed up, or your systems and structures can be in perfect shape. But until you're loving people and caring for them, those things are not what's going to bring life to the church, man. You got to invest in people and be in their lives, know more about them, and just kind of make that effort. You're not going to revitalize a church by sitting in your office and devising up a better org chart. And I think you're not going to change it. You're not going to do anything by those things. You got to be out there and finding those key leaders.
And it'll go faster and slower relationally than you think. What I mean by that is when you start preaching at a new church, you may have your text exactly the way that the scripture reveals the outline, a text-driven sermon, expositionally done, your research is on point. The missing part is the heart connect with people, and that's going to take time. And what will often happen, at least I've heard this, and there's a degree of which they'll come up and say, hey, you're getting better. You're getting better. Your sermons are getting better. And they might be, but to a degree, your personality is going to come through in your sermons. You're kind of preaching the same way you always have.
Right,
the difference is now you have access to hearts, so they're actually hearing what you're saying. And so I think those relationships, you have to be, I would think, and I do this, strategic in the people you're building relationships with. And so as you're laying and getting in, no matter the size of your church, it requires you to maybe visit homes, visit the homebound, build relationships with if you've got committees like we do, your committee leaders, helping get consensus, but subtly leading, and the shepherd will often lead from behind, just kind of helping them realize the direction they need to go until they are convinced, it's their idea. And now you're just going with their really good idea, but you've helped them get to that point. But that can only happen with spending time with people. You cannot, my pastor, when I was a college pastor, he would often say to me, you can't be Batman at a church. Batman would stay in his office, and then when there was a problem, he'd come out, and then he'd go back to the Bat Cave. That is super, I think, lazy that we can be as pastors. You've got to begin to fill your calendar strategically with time and space just to get to know people, and you don't overwhelm yourself. But I think building that relationship capital is critical when you need to make these important decisions. The mistake I made early on in my first senior pastorate at a First Baptist church that had been there a long time was I changed the logo, I changed the website, I changed all kinds of things, thinking that I was leading the church, and all I was doing was creating chaos because they thought I was getting rid of the name Baptist, and we weren't. It was still in the name, and I was doing too much. But instead, I should have invested all that time in having coffee and just asking people what their belief and their vision was for the church, just to get to know them. And I think when you do that instead, then when you change the logo and you change the website, that well, they're already invested in you as a leader.
Yeah.
I came to it with a completely, like this one, especially after doing it twice. I came to this church with, I mean, let me find all the things I can keep. Like, what can I build on this here? Rather than let me look at everything that I can change, let me see everything that I can keep.
That's right.
They already
That's
had
good.
they had their 3 E's, encounter, equip, engage. It could be 3 C's, it could be 3 D's, it could be whatever. But I was like, I can use that. That's not a problem. There's no need to change that. We already got it there. It's there. Let's just build on it. We may define it a little bit more clearly in what it is and those kind of things. And I added another E. So we added. So I wanted us to be thinking outwardly of raising up leaders and planting and sending. So I had encounter, equip, engage, and then I added establish the church. And so I wanted us to make that an emphasis in our movement. So I just said, what can we keep and build upon? And that was the better mindset for me rather than coming and saying, what do I need to change?
No, that's so good. I am reminded of something I was taught once. Like, and if you're a senior pastor here, just a simple way of kind of thinking about it is you really can't preach without pastoring people, and you can't pastor without preaching. And I think they need both the voice of the pastor and the hands of the pastor in terms of shepherding and care. I think both those things go hand in hand, and I love the thought of that. And, go ahead, Josh. You were just
No, I was saying, and it's not about your preference either. Like,
Right,
if I was just setting up my preferences, it wouldn't. My preferences, Taylor's First Baptist would not be like it is now. I'm not talking about convictions. I'm talking about preferences. If I'm just talking about my preferences, it wouldn't be exactly like it is right now. But I've got to work. I've set aside my own preferences as a pastor on things like worship styles or, org charts, leadership type things. I kind of set some of those aside, or even how some of my guys lead. I kind of set some of those aside and say, I mean, if they're working effectively toward the mission and vision, then let it go and not have to put my preferences in there. We can make our own preferences an idol at times as well. So that's, it's really about doing what's best for the people. When you're pastoring them, that's what you're looking for. What's best for these people right now? There's patience, and then there's times to hit the hole. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's times like the running back. You wait, and then when it's there, you got to hit it. And so you're evaluating all the time. You're being patient. But when the opportunity comes, and the opportunity this week may be in children's ministry, next week it may be in student ministry, next week it may be with some sort of event that you're ready to kill. When the opportunity happens, you jump at it. But you got to be patient, ready, and watching and waiting for those opportunities.
That's good. Other things, so like I guess we're kind of moved into this conversation around wisdom, advice you'd give a pastor looking to revitalize or currently revitalizing or pastoring an established church. We talked a little bit about relational capital, about you can't just sit and study and preach all the time. You've got to be with the people, and you can't just be with the people all the time and just trust God to speak. You got to do kind of both. And you got to be slow at making change. I love what you said about looking for what you can keep, not what you can change. I mean, that nugget right there is just really, really wise. Any other thoughts you would share with these guys?
Yeah, man, I oftentimes, my previous church, they had a drama they did at Christmas. It was a big deal. Now, it ended before I got there, and it was part of the reason the church was in a mess and chaos when I got there. We went down, me and my executive pastor went down to this building they had set aside for the drama, and they had literally almost 10,000 feet of drop cords. They wired the whole drama with drop cords. Now, I use that as an illustration. That church was like 10,000 feet of drop cords in a just knot after knot. And the only way to get the knots out is just one knot at a time. And so I kind of equate then church revitalization now. You got a drop cord that's got a bunch of knots in it, and the only way to do it is just one knot at a time. Patiently just work your way through this to where you get each knot out. And so we joke all the time, hey, we worked out another knot today. We got something worked out. You take advantage of people stepping away from ministries. You get it right when you can, but you just get one knot out at a time. And I think I kind of laugh, and this may be bad because I think they're helpful, but I kind of laugh at all the books on revitalization that are out there because I have read a few and they just don't help me at all. They don't know my context. They don't know the people. They don't know the immediate history of this church. I just think it's application of wisdom. And man, at Taylor's First in leadership, I am constantly quoting James chapter 1, if you need wisdom, ask. And don't doubt. So, man, my prayer is constantly, Lord, give me wisdom. Just about every day I can think of, give me wisdom to understand how to handle this, to know what to do, and to do it in a way that honors you, glorifies you, and builds up your church. And don't doubt.
Right. You mentioned this early on in a different question, Josh, but I think the role of the Holy Spirit in all of this is so critical. Walking closely with the heart of God helps you to operate with wisdom when you're making decisions. Our tendency is to want to maybe answer everything or try to be the expert of everything. But even on Sunday, I was asked a question in the hallway and I said, man, that is a wonderful question. This is not the time for me to try to give an answer to that, but let's table that and talk about it later and give me time to navigate all these things being thrown at me, because what might happen when you're trying to do the right thing by answering the question, you'll create this whole schism of things that you didn't even mean to, because you weren't walking with humility, weren't walking with the Holy Spirit. So walk closely with the Holy Spirit and you'll be able to revitalize a church, because revitalizing a church ultimately is simply just pastoring the local church, determining what the context is and knowing how to reach that context. Because my context, while our churches have some similarities, Texas is different than South Carolina and is different than North Carolina. And you better believe it.
Different than everywhere. Yeah,
that's right. And so understanding that, and I think that is in part what gets guys in trouble when they leave a particular state or maybe even a particular region. They parachute in thinking they have already figured it out when it's going to maybe take 6 to 18 to 24 months before you really know.
Well, and I say to people, I make jokes all the time. I've spoken on revitalization several times. I say us, you got revitalizers and you got church planners. We're trying to raise the dead. They're making a baby. And so which one is more fun and easier to do? And so there's no model, I think. That's the difference. I think you can look at different models for church plants. You can look at different models for how to expand past, like once you're healthy, into different models for like multi-campus. All those things have different models. But when it comes to revitalization, there's not a model. There's not a way you go, hey, I'm going to do this just like X did it. because every church is different and they're coming out of different paths, different pain or different celebrations. You got to evaluate for you, Criner, like, what is it? You can't look like you're trashing the previous pastor in your changes. So you have to navigate that in a way that says, no, I'm not upset. I love them, but we're going to move a little bit this way. You got to navigate that. For me, I didn't have to worry about that. I could come in and say, hey, we're changing this. And everybody's like, good, I've been waiting on somebody to change it. You know what I'm saying? It was it's just a different thing. So you want to say, here's step 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's just not that easy. Right. It's much more of a, man, let's see what the Lord has. Let's see where we want to be. Let's begin with the end in mind, work our way backwards, and let's get there through the power of the Spirit and the wisdom that the Lord gives us in achieving it. My encouragement would be to guys is like, hey, man, don't think you're failing if you don't have an answer for everything right now.
That's right.
Preach the word, lead from the pulpit, be with your people, and be ready. Be patient and be ready at the same time to take advantage of any situation that may come to steer the church in the direction you're looking to go.
That's great. How have you? So one big question would be, how have you managed to keep a sense of unity in the congregation? I know, Josh, you've done this well. I know you were again, established church leader already in the state. You had a lot of respect already going into this church. And you have not only led it faithfully forward, you've grown it in a huge way to be a multiplying church, to be you reach the lost. You've done all kinds of things there. How have you managed to keep a sense of unity in the congregation while making the effective changes you needed to make?
Man, and we have 3 services and we have 3 different styles. I mean, we are a complex First Baptist church. So it's not always the easiest. What I have to do in many ways is show honor to our older generation. And I've done everything I can to honor them. I've been present at their events. I set up teaching times that fits their schedule, not everybody else's schedule. I've done everything I can to honor them. And then because I've shown that honor, I start pressing them. And so I push them and say, hey, how do you want to leave this? I mean, obviously, looking back, I have the advantage that our church has a history that's been written about it. Mm. There's been 3 or 4 times in our history of our church that big decisions were made, whether it's a huge investment in building, huge investment in structure or change in ministry. And what we've seen in those 3 times is after those changes are made, which are great sacrifice, there's been a huge boom in growth within the life of the church. So I'll just point back to that and say, hey, 30 years ago, for example, with us, 30 years ago, they built our worship center. It's 30 years old. Nobody's touched it since then. How are we going to leave this for the next generation and just really get them to buy in by showing them honor and then pushing them and saying, hey, how do you want to leave this for your children and your grandchildren? And then on the younger crowd, I just try to push them and say, hey, let's do something. And so give them direction of next steps. Here's your next step. Here's your next thing. So constantly having the next step in front of our people. So with that in mind, thinking through of what each generation, you have to think through in a multi-generational church, what each generation needs to be doing to advance the mission and vision of the church. And it's different. That's the hard part. So you can bring unity by everybody doing their job and simply saying, hey, I need you as the older generation to one, not stand in the way of some change, but encourage them. What would you have liked for them to do for you when you were younger? Encourage them. And we've done that. We mesh our life groups where our older ones will serve breakfast to our younger ones. We do a lot of that kind of stuff, but you've got to figure out in a multi-generational church what each generation needs to be thinking about right now to advance the mission and vision of the church. And when you can put your finger on that, it brings unity because everybody's doing quote unquote their role, their responsibility. And I've had a lot of joy in seeing our older generation go, I get it. I don't want to stand in the way. I want to encourage. And our younger generation say, hey, tell us what to do. We're ready to go. We're ready to fight. We'll be the legs. We'll be the hands. We'll be the feet in ministry. Let's go. So just kind of saying, here's your role and here's what I need from you. Being very clear to each one is what I've tried to be.
That's awesome.
That's good, Josh. Yeah, that's really good. So what it sounds like is what you're talking about is casting vision.
Yes.
I think every new pastor faces that challenge, no matter the size of the church or the age of the church. What's the vision, Pastor? What's the vision? What's the vision? And I think we get in trouble when we try to give an answer to that before we've actually found out where, in my case,
right,
how many floors are in the building, where the bathrooms are.
Oh, yeah.
And, so maybe coach some of us on how did you go about, what are some key lessons on vision casting and when to do it, and in the context of particularly a legacy church? I'm grateful, just as some context for us, I am grateful for the vision that Pastor Steve gave to this church, particularly on the back end of his ministry. One of his visions for the church was that it would be debt-free when he retired, because he knew that if he left debt, it would actually hamstring the incoming pastor. And so he worked really hard to make sure that was one of his visions, was that it would be done in that way, and that he was leaving it healthier than when he got it, and not that it was given to him unhealthy. So what are some maybe key lessons that you could give for guys when they're casting vision in the context of a legacy church?
First, don't do it too early. I see some guys come in and they go, here's the vision, and they get it real out there, and the people aren't ready for it. It took me over a year here at Taylor's. I was here
Mm,
for over a year before I ever gave any kind of vision sermon of what we're doing. Um, the reason for that is, one, of course, you got to build trust. Uh, but there's that period where you're just trying to figure out, one, I can't cast a vision my staff can't carry out, and two, I
it's good.
can't cast a vision that my people can't get a handle on. You know what I'm saying? They can't grasp. And so, or even when I mean grasp, I mean how can it even get done when you don't have the nuts and bolts in place that you can even say, here's how we can do it. So I waited over a year to cast the vision for what we were trying to do, and mine was grabbing a hold, kind of like what you're probably going to have to do. You're saying, hey, we're debt free, but that doesn't mean, I mean, that means we have now a springboard to launch into the future.
That's right.
So you're going to be able to jump off the debt free into the next phase of
Right.
what it is you need to do. Here I can grab hold of, we've been a generous giving church. Let's keep that going, but we're not just going to give our resources such as money. We're going to start giving our people. We're going to
Mm,
start training up people. And that was the vision I had. So we're giving, but we're going to expand our generosity, and we're going to train up, building internships, building residencies, building what we call like an institute. We're training. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna start launching people out, and we're gonna send out as many as we can. So building on the past, and then jumping into, we're gonna send people too. So it was quick for them to see. And so when I cast my vision, it was, we're gonna have this, we're gonna have this, we're gonna have this to establish the church, and we're gonna send them
mm.
out because we want to change the world for Jesus, not just our community, not just this area. We're gonna change the world. And so that's going to be done by creating new leaders and sending them out. So it was able to grab hold of what they had and build upon it to the next thing,
That's
rather
good.
than saying, "Hey, we're just going to trash everything we're doing in the past, and we're going to build upon this." And that was kind of what I
Yeah.
was looking forward to.
Yeah.
It
That's
must be
great.
nice to be taking over churches who both were debt free. I took over Christ Community, and it was saddled with debt. And we were so far, like 45% of the budget went to debt. And so I didn't have the luxury of waiting. I mean, I think I was 7 months in when I had to preach a vision sermon, and everyone says, don't preach a sermon, a vision sermon geared toward paying off debt. It doesn't work. But we had no other choice. And so it was really crazy because, in any sort of those vision sermons, what's the anchor of them all is the Great Commission,
Right.
and it should be the anchor of all of our sort of the church's vision, the glorification of God among the nations.
Yeah.
And so when I preached that sermon, it was geared towards evangelism, it was geared towards church planting, it was geared toward reaching the nations, and we could not do that until the debt was taken care of. And the vision behind it all was to just pray for the Lord to work, to
Mm,
give, and to believe God wanted us to get back on mission. And like both of you guys who've had successful sort of vision sermons and seasons of incredible growth, and God just answers when a church sets
mhm.
its eyes on the glory of Christ across the nations.
That's right.
Yeah.
So with
I
that,
truly
I'll
believe.
bring up
Yeah.
some Go ahead,
No,
Josh.
you're good. I'm sorry. I want to say this, Ronnie. What you've done at Christ Community is, I mean,
It's
just as
amazing.
impressive as far as trusting
Yeah.
the Lord, following after. I mean, in many ways, you inherited a situation that's even harder than what we had. I mean, this legacy church wasn't going anywhere. It doesn't matter how
Mm,
many people had kind of done, and it may have kind of looked a little shabby, but it was here and it's established, and it wasn't going anywhere. You inherited a situation that really was a make or break for that a younger congregation and life of a church, and then it's thriving through your leadership. So on the same level, any of these any of these things can work in any situation.
right.
I just, man, I feel like, and this is what I would say to any younger pastor: don't feel like you have to read a book to figure this out. I mean, they're
Yeah.
helpful. They're not unhelpful. But man, you've
Right.
got to get to the place to do this. You got to trust your calling and your leadership abilities and what the Lord has gifted you with. He's
Yeah.
called you to be the pastor of those people. So just trust it. It took me a while to get there,
Yeah.
but just trust what he's called you to do and the vision he's given you and the heart he's given you to lead them. You got to just trust yourself And I say trust yourself. What I mean is trust the Lord working through you and what he gives you.
Yeah, that's so good. Hey, well, I'll go ahead and wrap the podcast. Let me ask you guys one quick question. Any your favorite resource, favorite book, favorite whatever that you would encourage pastors to pick up, to read? You have just one favorite. It can be a website you visit, or it can be a book or a resource. What's it going to be?
Have you written a book, Ronnie? Have you written a book on this?
I have not. No, I have not written a book.
It would be that one.
Yeah, that's right.
If you had written one, it would be that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of you.
I'll just say this: the challenge for me is I'm kind of have revisionist history, so whatever I'm currently in tends to be that, or it's not that. So right now, one of the guys in our group of friends recommended this book called "Waiting on God," and I've been slowly walking through that, and it has been super helpful. It's very brief. It's like a little devotional. It's a complement to my reading through the Bible. But it's been so nice to sit there and just have some language that's older. Just I don't know, center my heart's affection on the Lord. Like me, I generally am not a patient person. I want to rush the process. But that little book by Andrew Murray has been helpful for me just to go, hey, you need to wait on me today. Wait on the Holy Spirit. Wait for me to give you exactly what you need. And that's been really helpful for me. So that'd be a resource I'm currently using. I know that may not apply, but that's been more heart impact than anything else in this season of transition.
Now, I'll say the best books have been books for myself. Like my own organization, my own thought processes, those have been the best. So like Matt Pierman's What's Best Next, kind of evaluating the next step, and some of those have been really helpful to me, more so than a book about revitalizing the church. Because again, oftentimes I feel like those aren't in the right context. There's nuggets there, but the books that help me think through, like, what do I need to be doing right now? And just what you're saying, Criner, like, waiting on God. Sometimes you need to wait. Sometimes you need to move. Right. Those kind of books helping me get organized have been better for me, and that's just kind of my own personal tendencies.
Yeah, I would
agree with you, Josh. I think there's a lot of those practical, leadership-driven books that are really helpful because at the end of the day, the church is still an organization which requires people management and leadership and all kinds of things. Right. And there's nothing wrong with learning from some of the best there.
Well, and Ronnie, I would say this, one of the most helpful things in this season has been connecting with other guys at similar sized churches and maybe even a size above where we currently are. That doesn't mean that's where we're going to end up, but it just helps me think through things that learning from them. So I think if guys who are listening to this and they're at a church, they should be intentional about picking up the phone or sending out an email and just asking another pastor who's in their network of people just to pick their brain. I have done that multiple times with guys all throughout our state and the country and have learned some things to go, man, that's really helpful. I mean, Josh, you even said, can't cast a vision that my staff can't carry out. Well, that's a huge nugget. Well, those are things that you can learn. A resource. You're not going to get that in a book, or you might, but
right.
But ultimately, man, it's going, man, this guy did that. That worked there. Would that help in our context? Is that something that that isn't something, or that is something? So, well, I think guys, they would actually grow, and their churches might even grow when they just asked for help. And our pride gets in the way of that. So walk with a sense of humility to go, man, I don't know. I'm not the expert on this. Let me find out and grow from that. And I've seen that even within our own staff here already to go, man, we want to learn. We want to grow. We know we can do better. We want to find out what that's like.
Well, and I want to add to that real quick if I can, Ronnie. I know we're about to get off. And this may be bad to say, so we may have to cut this out the podcast. I find that the larger church guys who are in it, with a little bit bigger staff, maybe some things like that, man, they have been so incredibly helpful to me that whenever I was a young pastor in a smaller church context, I couldn't find other pastors to give me a nugget for anything. It was more competitive sometimes. And I don't mean that bad. I'm just saying that's been my experience. What Michael's saying is so true to me. I've got several friends now who I'm going to tell me what to do right now because I've got no idea.
Yep.
Like, how did you handle this? Like, talking through the next steps. I don't know. I haven't been through it. I don't know. And those guys have been like, man, here's what I did. Here's what I used. I'll take this, take that. They've been so helpful. I would love for that, and I know our pride gets in the way, like Michael said. I would love for that to be the case anywhere. It's not always been my experience. Man, if you're listening to this, I don't care what size church you're in. If somebody calls you and says, hey, help me think through something, brother, I think that's our role and responsibility as pastors and brothers is to say,
that's right.
All right, we want to see everybody thrive here. There's not enough spaces in our churches if revival happened now in Greenville County to house everybody. I need more brothers thriving and serving and growing. So anyway, that's just a little bit of
that's great. No, brothers, I appreciate both of you guys. Appreciate your friendship. Appreciate your leadership. Hey, I want to encourage everyone to check out Taylor's First Baptist Church, Josh Powell, and First Baptist Church Rock Wall in East Texas with Michael Criner. Grateful for these guys. Some of the greatest preachers I know right now, and I love it. I love listening to them preach, and I know you will too. I do want to thank you for listening today. If you're enjoying our podcast, you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please rate it, review it, subscribe to the podcast so we can continue to produce more content just like this to serve pastors just like you so that churches just like yours can grow and thrive. So thanks for listening today, and we'll see you on the next episode.